32 knots. That's the speed of a vessel the size of a shopping mall, displacing over 100,000 tons of ocean, not racing to a destination, but holding position in the middle of open sea, pointed at a precise angle, maintaining an exact speed, while jet aircraft, weighing 45,000 pounds, launch off its bow every 90 seconds. It never stops. Not during flight operations. Not during storms. Not when the aircraft are all safely landed. The movement itself is the mission. Most people look at a Nimitz class or Gerald R. Ford class carrier and see a warship. What they're actually looking at is a moving airfield, a self-propelled wind machine, a disappearing act, and a power plant, all operating simultaneously. And every single one of those functions depends on the ship never being still. Pull on any one of those threads, and the same answer comes back every time. Keep moving. The reasons stack up fast. Here's where it starts. Wind. An FA-18 Super Hornet weighs roughly 45,000 pounds, fully loaded. Fuel. Weapons. Pilot. Airframe. 45,000 pounds of machine that needs to leave a deck and climb. To do that, it needs airflow moving fast enough over its wings to generate lift. Without enough airflow, the physics don't work. The wing doesn't lift. The aircraft doesn't fly. It goes off the end of the deck and into the water. The flight deck of an aircraft carrier is roughly 330 feet wide and just over 1,000 feet long. That sounds enormous until you understand what it actually has to accomplish. A loaded Super Hornet needs somewhere between 160 and 180 knots of wind over the deck to launch safely. The steam catapult system, or on the newer Gerald R. Ford, classed the electromagnetic launch system, accelerates the aircraft from a standing start to flying speed in under 3 seconds across roughly 300 feet of deck. That is the mechanical contribution. But the wind over the deck is not optional. The catapult gives the aircraft speed. The wind gives it the ability to convert that speed into flight. Remove the wind, and the catapult is throwing a very expensive object into the ocean. Now here's the problem. The ocean doesn't always cooperate. On a calm day, with natural winds sitting at 5 or 10 knots, the carrier has a deficit. It needs 20 or more additional knots of wind that simply don't exist in the surrounding air. So it makes them. The ship turns into whatever wind exists and accelerates into it. The act of moving through calm air at 25 knots creates 25 knots of apparent wind across the deck. Combined with whatever natural wind is already present, the carrier manufactures the atmospheric conditions its aircraft require to survive the first 3 seconds after the catapult releases them. Think about what that means physically. A vessel heavier than all the steel used to construct the Empire State Building, moving at highway speed through open ocean, pointed with the precision of a compass needle, for the sole purpose of tricking a 45,000-pound jet into believing there is a headwind strong enough to keep it airborne. The ship is not going anywhere in that moment. It is generating weather. That is the first reason it never stops. But wind is only the beginning. The real machinery at work on a carrier is time, and the way time pressure compounds when you have dozens of aircraft airborne simultaneously with nowhere else to go. A carrier air wing conducting full flight operations is not launching aircraft one at a time and waiting politely for each one to return before sending the next. It is running a continuous, overlapping cycle that looks from above like controlled chaos, and from inside like a precisely choreographed machine operating at the absolute edge of its tolerances. Aircraft are launching off the bow catapults. At the same moment, aircraft are recovering on the angled deck at the stern. The angled deck, that distinctive diagonal runway that gives modern carriers their asymmetric shape, exists specifically so that landing aircraft and launching aircraft don't occupy the same strip of pavement at the same time. That was a British invention from the 1950s, and it changed carrier aviation permanently. Before the angled deck, a landing aircraft that missed the arresting wires had nowhere to go except into the aircraft parked at the bow. The angled deck gives a bolter, a missed wire landing, a clear path to fly off and come around again. While recoveries and launches are happening simultaneously, dozens of aircraft are being spotted, fueled, armed, and repositioned across the flight deck surface by crews working around running jet engines. In all weather, day and night, helicopters orbit in a holding pattern on search and rescue standby. Tanker aircraft fly racetrack patterns above the group, passing fuel through a hose to jets that burned more than expected on the mission. Everything is moving. Everything is timed. And every aircraft in that system has a fuel state. A hard countdown before the engine stops producing thrust. The carrier must hold its heading and speed throughout the entire cycle, because every pilot currently airborne is flying an approach or a holding pattern calculated against a ship moving in a known direction at a known speed. The approach path, the glide slope angle, the lateral lineup, all of it is computed relative to a moving reference point that the pilot trusts to stay predictable. Change the heading mid-recovery, and every calculation breaks. Pilots have to abort their approaches, climb back out, re-enter the pattern, and recompute. That takes time and fuel, and some of them are already at the minimum fuel state required for a single approach attempt. There is no divert airport. There is no emergency runway 50 miles away. There is only this one moving ship, and it must be exactly where every pilot in the air expects it to be, moving exactly as fast as they calculated, pointed exactly where they planned. The flight deck at full operational tempo is like a highway interchange, where every on-ramp, every off-ramp, and every merge is running simultaneously with zero tolerance for any disruption. One stop vehicle shuts down the entire system. The carrier holds its course not as a preference, but as a life support obligation to every pilot currently airborne. Now here's the part that runs completely against what most people assume, and it matters more than almost anything else on this list. The common assumption is that a carrier's protection comes from its escorts, the Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers, surrounding it in a layered defensive screen, the cruisers coordinating air defense across the entire strike group, the combat air patrol fighters orbiting above, the fast attack submarines running ahead and below. All of that is real, and all of it is essential. But the first layer of protection is not a weapon system. It is not a radar. It is not a missile battery. It is geometry. A missile fired at an aircraft carrier was aimed at a location, programmed with coordinates, or a predicted intercept point, based on where the carrier was at a specific moment in time, or where a targeting algorithm calculated it would be when the weapon arrived. A carrier that has changed heading, altered speed, or shifted position even modestly in the window between that targeting solution being generated and the weapon reaching its destination is no longer at that location. The ocean covers roughly 140 million square miles of surface. A carrier operating under emissions control, running without active radar transmissions that could be tracked, moving at speed, changing course on an unpredictable schedule, is not invisible to a determined adversary with satellites and long-range maritime patrol aircraft. But what continuous movement creates is uncertainty. And in the mathematics of anti-ship missile guidance, a small margin of positional uncertainty translates directly into a miss. A miss against an aircraft carrier in open ocean means the weapon hits water. The ocean is an excellent interceptor. A stationary carrier eliminates all of that uncertainty in a single decision. It becomes a fixed coordinate, a known point that does not require prediction because it is not going anywhere. Fixed points do not survive saturation missile attacks from a modern peer adversary. This is not a theoretical concern. It is the central lesson of every naval wargame the United States Navy has run for the last 4 decades. This is why carrier strike group operations involve constant, deliberate maneuvering, even in the absence of any identified threat. The unpredictability is not reactive. It is not something the crew activates when danger appears on the radar screen. It is structural doctrine, built into how the ship operates from the moment it clears the harbor entrance to the moment it returns. Stopping is not a rest. It is handing an adversary a solved problem and asking them not to use it. There is a fourth reason the carrier never stops, and it almost never appears in any public discussion of carrier operations. A nuclear-powered Nimitz-class carrier runs 2 Westinghouse A4W reactors. Together, they produce somewhere in the range of 600,000 shaft horsepower. To give that number a physical shape, imagine lining up more than 1,500 full-size automobile engines side by side, all of them running simultaneously at wide-open throttle, and channeling every horsepower they collectively produce into 4 propeller shafts. Each shaft turns a bronze propeller, roughly 21 feet across. Those 4 propellers push over 100,000 tons of steel through seawater at speeds that would leave most recreational boats well behind. Those reactors generate heat on a scale that is difficult to fully appreciate from the outside. The propulsion system absorbs the majority of that energy and converts it into shaft rotation and forward motion. But a nuclear vessel's thermal management is a continuous engineering balancing act. The ship's speed, its power draw from the reactors, and its cooling systems all operate within parameters that assume sustained underway operations. Extended periods at very low speed or full stop create thermal and operational conditions the system was not optimized to handle indefinitely. And beyond the reactors, there are the people. Nearly 5,000 crew members living and working inside a vessel with the internal square footage of a mid-sized urban office tower, conducting around-the-clock operations across every department simultaneously. Aviation fuel moving through miles of internal piping, weapons transiting through magazine elevators from the deep storage decks up to the flight deck, aircraft being maintained, inspected, and cycled through every hour of every day. The sustained operational rhythm of a carrier at sea is one of the most complex continuous human logistics operations that exists anywhere on Earth. It is calibrated around a ship that is underway. Stopping does not pause that rhythm. It disrupts every system downstream that depends on it. So here is what you were actually looking at the last time you saw footage of a carrier strike group pushing through open ocean, with its escorts spread around it. Not a warship moving between 2 points on a map, a system actively maintaining the atmospheric conditions its aircraft need to fly, the timing precision its pilots need to land safely, the geometric uncertainty its survival depends on, the thermal balance its reactors require, and the operational tempo that keeps 5,000 people and 100 aircraft functioning as a single integrated weapons system. The movement is not travel. The movement is the infrastructure. The speed is a utility the entire system draws from continuously. The heading is a product being manufactured in real time and delivered to every aircraft in the air and every adversary targeting system trying to solve the location problem. It never stops, because stopping was never part of the design. Here's what makes all of this stranger when you sit with it. Those 2 reactors powering everything described above do not need to be refueled for roughly 20 years. Not 20 months, 20 years. 2 decades of open ocean operations, global transits, sustained flight operations, and crisis response deployments on a single fuel load, contained in a space that would fit inside a modest suburban home. That one engineering decision changed the meaning of naval power projection entirely. It removed the fuel convoys. It eliminated the logistics chain that had historically told an admiral where he could operate, and for how long. It made the carrier genuinely independent of the coastline and the supply port, in a way no warship in history had ever been before. Before nuclear propulsion, a carrier's operational range was measured in days before it needed a tanker alongside. After nuclear propulsion, the constraint stopped being fuel. It became food, aviation ordnance, and the endurance of the crew. The reactor freed the ship from the ocean's geography in a fundamental way. If you want to understand why an American carrier strike group can appear off the coast of a developing crisis anywhere on Earth within 72 hours of an order being given, the answer is not the aircraft. And it is not the escorts. It is that reactor and the specific dependency it removed from the equation decades ago. That story has layers that most people have never heard.